ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me today is not Zach Bartles. However, we've got Greg Dutcher joining me again today. Zach could not make it because of the timing of the recording of all the podcasts and everything, but I'm so stoked to have the godfather of These Go to 11 back.
Man.
Greg Dutcher. Greg, this is just like old times, baby.
It is. I love it, dude. This is just you and me.
Yeah.
Starting off like in the old sound room in the old church building.
That's right.
This time in a more, even more casual, relaxed atmosphere at Casabel. I love it.
Yeah. We got the kind of the middle bedroom of our house set up and got that soundproof worthy of being able to do these recordings in here. So we got a nice big, huge full-size bed over there that's like taking up a good quarter of the room here.
Yeah, I'm going to hop on that thing halfway through this, man. You might have to bring it all the way home if I'm on that. Hey, and I wanted to say you gave Bartles, you gave him the culturally appropriate excuse. He's got things going on. I wanted to give a biblical one why he's not here because he's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Right, so I'm hoping Zach hears that.
Well, if everybody listened to the previous podcast,
oh, dude, that was fun.
So yeah, last week's podcast, of course, Zach was joining us, and the reason why he's not is we're doing two of these back to back in one day, and he had to go pick up his business partner and friend Ted Cluck,
Mr. Cluck,
and so they're going to be looking forward to smoking many cigars in his Nakatomi smoke room up there in Michigan. So.
Yeah, see, we don't do that neither because we're Bible-believing Christians.
No, actually, Greg, we don't do that because my wife would kill us if we smoked in this room.
Exactly. And Lisa would say to me, "Why are you spending money on cigars?"
Right.
So that's probably more accurate for sure.
But I want to give a quick shout out to Missional Wear. As always, we love partnering with them. We love the great products that they are producing over there. I was actually just looking at their line of coasters that they have. I know in my house, my wife is always getting on me about putting, the drinks that sweat onto furniture and things like that. And they have some great coasters over there, the Spurgeon, the Calvin, the Post-Tenebras Lux, the Killing Sin. So even things as small as that, if you're looking to kind of decorate your house a little bit, this is something that you can throw in there from Missional Wear that's, not like ostentatious and out there, but more subtle, and people are looking at it going, hey, that's kind of cool. Where'd you get that? And work Missional Wear into the conversation. So check out missionalwear.com for all of your great reformed needs and or wants.
Yes.
So Greg, it's funny because we just finished recording with Zach, and Zach was like, what are you guys talking about? And I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go along.
We'll talk and something will emerge or it won't. But no, I think something has emerged.
Yeah, something has emerged. We had a, brief little, 2 or 3 minute break while I was saving the previous podcast. And we were initially going to start off talking, just kind of maybe go a little old school, talk about entertainment and some of the things we'd been watching. And then you were like, maybe we can somehow work it in and do something on styles of preaching and things like that. Yeah. And so I was like, well, why don't we do that first? Because I'm going to be going back to New Hampshire. We leave this Thursday, which will be June 21st, and we go up north, and we're going to be out of state in the New England area for 3 weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. Yeah. And when I go home, if I can, I try to preach in my small hometown church that I grew up in. I've been doing that since I was in high school, really.
That's awesome.
When my pastor would go away, he would come to me and say, hey, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. He would get a 2-week back-to-back vacation in the summertime, and would you mind preaching one of those weeks? And so I would do that. And so every time I go back home, I let him know, and if it works out, then I end up preaching on one of the Sundays that I'm there. So and so I just thought this would be great because you've been doing more research on styles of preaching, not necessarily content. And I want to put that out there because you're going to mention some names.
Oh, yeah.
And people are going to be like, one of two things. Either people are going to automatically dismiss you as a heretic because you've been listening to them, or they're going to be like, oh, well, Greg listens to them, so they must be good.
Yeah.
And so we want to caveat this and just be like, you're listening to these preachers, all different kinds of preachers, simply for their style.
Right.
And doing your best to kind of ignore the content.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so talk to me how that's been going and what kind of sparked you into that journey.
Good question, Nathan. When I was a new believer, I was 16. And, of course, my parents at the time were not Christians, and I remember coming in one evening. I feel like it must have been a Sunday evening. And my father, I found him doing this a couple of times, is watching. I mean, so this is like 86, 87. Okay. He's watching Jimmy Swaggart.
Oh, wow.
On TV. And I was puzzled by it, and I didn't say anything. And then I asked him after one of these viewings, I said, Dad, were you watching Jimmy Swaggart? And he kind of chuckled and said, yeah, my father, I don't know if I got it from him, loves the art of oratory. And I've heard him speak a few times he was a librarian, he was a branch manager of a librarian, so he never had much of a venue for it, but, a staff kind of thing, a retirement party. I've heard my dad speak, a little bit of wedding rehearsal dinner. And, he is a connoisseur of speaking, not that he does much of it, but he appreciates it. So
he must have loved the 8 years that our former President Obama was in office then.
Oh, yeah, probably, because Obama is known as the orator, right? And although my personal view on that dude is that he did love his oratory. I actually thought for oratory, Clinton had an effective means. He had that Southern kind of thing going on, and he had to me, a certain polish he had picked up along the way, where Obama, they say, was a little more wedded to the teleprompter. Oh, yeah. But, man, he delivered it well. Yeah. I mean, whatever you think of Obama, he delivered it.
Smooth swagger that came from him, which was something to look at. I actually just introduced my students to some of Reagan's speeches. I teach middle school science, and so when Reagan was in office, you had a Challenger that blew up. On its way up, it blew up, and it was the first. It was actually, it was the first shuttle, the very first shuttle of all the space program that exploded in launch. We had several that were unmanned that exploded on the ground. We had the one fire that killed the 3 astronauts, but this was the very first one. And that speech that he gives,
that touched the face of God.
Yeah, it's just you're sitting down there and. This is a father inviting you as a child into the living room to explain this tragedy. And there's just such tenderness and compassion in his voice and the way he gives that. And, I teach at a predominantly black school. Yeah. And my students are all about Obama.
Right.
Whether they can articulate why or not, they're all about it. And I showed them that speech, and they were blown away. Yeah. They had never heard or seen anything like this before.
It was incredible. That's the one, isn't it, where they slip the Survey bonds?
Yeah, he quotes it's actually a poem that he quotes toward the end of that, and that's where that poem comes from.
That's right. And touch the face
of God. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that speech, Nathan, because I was 86, around the same time I'm talking about. I was in high school. I was in a science class, and they wheeled in the television.
Yeah, to watch the launch, right?
And it was just incredible. You were checking Christy McCullough,
which I knew actually because she taught right down the school from where I went to school in Concord, New Hampshire.
No way.
And she came into our school to talk about the mission and the program, and we were watching the launch live.
Unbelievable.
When it happened. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, Nathan. Yeah, it was, that's a great speech. Reagan is just if you look at him for, again, his oratory flourish, a famous speech of his given at the Republican convention, I want to say it might be as far back as 64 when Goldwater was running, or was that 68? It all predates both of us, so I don't feel bad. Listeners can correct us. But he, it's called A Time for Choosing, and it's a very well-delivered speech. The other one that I don't hear as much about, but I remember seeing on a History Channel thing or something like that, it was the 40th anniversary of the Normandy invasion, and he spoke there.
Yeah.
Some powerful moments
Yeah.
in that speech.
Most famously, his address to the Soviet Union
Oh,
when he
of
went
course,
over
yeah.
there, and then of course his farewell address that he gives.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, he and had that buttery voice. Just
Yeah.
had a tremendous voice. See, I love. I've kind of picked that up, and I would say, Nathan, over my sabbatical, which we just talked about last week with Zach.
Yep.
Didn't mention this, but about halfway through, when I was getting some really, really big fish fried, and I got to some of the smaller fish, I just started thinking about some personal goals that I had upon my return.
Sure.
And this doesn't rank as high as many of them, but it's just sort of an interesting podcast topic, I think, is style of preaching.
Yeah.
And I'm not radically changing my style, but what I came to see was I feel good about my style, but I've just coasted, and I put all of my work into content. I hope this sounds okay. I'm still putting plenty of work into content,
right?
But I'm thinking more about how I communicate it, how I deliver it. So a couple of quick takeaways, and then we can get into some other other speakers and how they address things and how they bring the audience in. Lisa, has been invaluable to me in this, and I asked her, Lisa, what do you think? And she said, well, I think you're kind of in high gear right out of the gate, and you stay in high gear. And she said, so I think that may, and she's not even sure, she's just wondering. She goes, I think it's generally worked for you, Greg. She goes, but I wonder, I was watching Andy Stanley. Okay, so I'm not talking about unhitching from the Old Testament or anything like that. I'm just saying as a pure style communicator.
Right.
I was watching him, he's very engaging with his congregation. You can tell when they pan to the audience, he's got a pretty captive audience. They're listening, and he's incredibly conversational. He's not really a screamer. Doesn't hit those real high points, and then, boom. He's just sort of conversationally going. And Lisa said, I'm surprised that you're intrigued by him because you are not like him at all.
Right.
She wasn't saying it critically.
Sure.
But she just said, your style is so different.
Yep.
And so one of the things I'm trying to do is speak a little more conversationally and save some of the overdrive.
Yeah.
So that it's maybe a little more effective. She says, it's what any Christian seminar leader will tell parents. If you're always yelling, your kids don't listen to you.
Right.
And they say, you'll probably get your kids' attention more if you whisper.
Yeah.
If you don't take that trash out.
Right.
There's going to be real consequences.
Right.
Just the shock
That's
value
a lot
of
more
it.
chilling than,
and it might make those kids kind of, oh, she doesn't normally talk like that, or he doesn't talk like that.
Right.
So, kind of went a little bit ahead there, but I'm just being a little more cognizant. I want to say, again, all the caveats. It's the gospel that saves people.
Yeah.
Not the style of the communicator.
Yeah.
I sort of view this in keeping as a stewardship responsibility. In other
Sure.
words, I think Spurgeon believed in some rhetorical flourish. I think one of his quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, was, you've got the best food in the world to serve up.
Right.
Put it on your best china.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people love the Jonathan Edwards reading the manuscript in a bland voice. I get it.
Right.
It definitely speaks to the power of the message.
Right.
I tend to think that what happened there with when he preached sinners in the hands of an angry God was a true sovereign revival.
Sure.
I'm not sure we're supposed to look at that and say that's how we should preach.
Yeah. Would it be fair, though, to say that you shouldn't try to break your personality to become someone else? Because
dude.
I remember when I first started preaching, and at that point, like I said, I was in high school, so I was a late birthday, so I was 15 or 16 as opposed to 14 entering ninth grade.
Sure.
And I remember when I first started preaching, I tried to be more humorous in my messages, and I felt like this isn't me. It just tanked.
Yeah.
Where now my approach is, I feel like I have an engaging personality and an engaging voice with people.
Yes.
And so they're naturally going to listen to what I have to say. And if humor comes from the things that I'm saying, so be it. But if I don't have one humorous moment in the sermon I'm preaching, I'm okay with that.
Yes.
I don't necessarily need to have that funny moment. I'm gonna, this is who I am. This is how I engage. And so it seems like when I try to force the issue, it flops.
Right.
And to me, it's like it's not worth it. Would you say that? That's...
Oh, dude, you're nailing it. Well, first of all, Nathan, your voice is one of. I mean, that's your instrument, man. Everybody that listens to the podcast has always said, your voice is butter, man, and it's good. It is a great voice. So that's going to give you a leg up, just because the tone, timbre, whatever the right words are, of your voice is so good. But agree, your persona, you're speaking from your heart, you're speaking real, you're relating it to your life, and it's very, very relatable. I have lived. Well, part of it is I am such an unintentional chameleon. Because I tend to just I have this obsessive part of my personality. When I watch something, I really get into it. And it occupies my attention. It's part of my ADHD where I'm able to hyper focus on one thing. And in the hyper focus, it can be all about Breaking Bad for a month of my life, where I'm talking about it nonstop, and then still love it. But I've probably gone a while where I haven't talked about that with somebody. So it's very natural for me to take on the characteristics of that preacher. When I was first preaching, kind of right as I was going into seminary, I was preaching at my old PCA church. My first sermon was basically a ripoff of John MacArthur, his style. Even the way he says God, if you listen to him, it's kind of it almost sounds like a Midwestern thing, although he's a Californian. But even my cadence was sort of, and that's why we know, and we live, and we love, and we see. MacArthur does some of these things. He's got some little idiosyncrasies in his preaching that are just part of his personality. When I do them, it's phony. It's not who I am. I don't talk like that. So, I definitely think the preacher should find his own voice. The communicator should find his own voice. So that when you're listening to other people, observing how other people speak, you're more asking the question, okay, I can't be this guy. He's not me. But what is he doing? Is he doing anything intentionally or maybe unintentionally that's really, really effectively grabbing people's attention that maybe I could benefit from?
Now, when you say Andy Stanley has more of a conversational tone to it, what do you mean by that? Because when I think of conversation, I think of what we're doing right now. There's question and interview and explanation. Where he's not gathering necessarily the input from the audience and the raising of the hand and things like that. So describe to me what you mean by that conversational aspect.
Good question. Probably has more to do that his delivery maybe feels more like one side of a conversation. So it is a monologue. He's not being interactive, nor does he intend to. I mean, he'll be a little interactive the way all preachers are. Like, you know what I mean? Or let me see. Does anybody do such and such? But it's hard to say. His style is not as preachy as mine. In other words, the voice that I use when I preach is intentionally different than what I'm using now. So that, I've often thought if I were to talk to you, Nathan, like I talked to the people yesterday on a Sunday, they'd be like, Nathan, I know sometimes as we're considering what we're going to talk about on this podcast, you're wondering, do I do this or do I do that? That would be weird. And people are like, what the crap is this guy doing, man? And but it's not weird on Sunday. Because it fits the occasion. Stanley's probably, if conversational might not be the best word, because if he were sitting with us doing this podcast, it would still be some of that Sunday morning necessary polished monologue, but it's closer to what we're doing.
You get a feel that his tone when he's up on stage is probably going to be similar to his tone in the podcast.
Real quick aside though, dude. I mean, he is a good communicator.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, brilliant communicator. Right. And I've heard him on a number of occasions. And I do appreciate, this is a little more content. He told a story that I was a little surprised he told, because, we've talked about this, dude. Most pastors' illustrations are safe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So our ongoing joke is, what if the pastor wants to share how he's a sinner? Sometimes I don't think I pray as much as I should. Right. Oh my word!
Right.
What a devastating revelation!
Right. I yell at my kids every once in a while.
Every so often. Sometimes I just don't know that I'm putting the Lord first like I should. It's like, oh wow, man, this guy's getting real danger of losing his job here. And so anyway, he told a story. I heard this recently. Can't remember what series he was doing, but I think it was how we get ourselves into trouble with our words.
Yeah.
And I appreciated his honesty, and again his conversational tone.
Right.
Added to it, because it's just like what you would tell me if we were sitting in Starbucks somewhere.
Yeah.
Said, same woman's been cutting his hair, I don't know, 20 years or something. So every 6 to 8 weeks, he's seen this woman for 20 years.
Yeah.
And they become friends, of course, and they've gotten to know each other. The way he told it, I think she's a believer, or she became a believer, maybe in part through their friendship. And, she was very close to her dad. I think her dad became a believer, and so they would just talk. And every time he would sit down, one of his first questions to her was, say her name is Mary. Hey, Mary, how's your dad? Mm-hmm. And, Dad's great. And then over the years, it was, how's your dad? He's not been feeling so well lately. And then over the years, how's your dad? The procedure didn't work as well as they hoped. How's your dad? He's going into hospice.
Yeah.
How's your dad? Not much longer.
Yeah.
And then Dad died. And Stanley says, and I helped officiate the service. Mm-hmm. I prayed in it, etc. We had the service. Dad was buried, etc. Next time comes up for the haircut. Some weeks later, sits down. Can you guess what his first word is? Hey, how's your dad? You hear the audience gasp.
Right.
And he kind of took, because, I told you, this is bad.
Right.
This is bad. And I thought, man, I appreciated the honesty, because it's so relatable.
Yeah.
Haven't we all done something like that?
Oh, yeah. You get into a habit and a routine. And
exactly.
You're on autopilot.
You're on autopilot. And her answer was great, because she kind of looked at him surprised. And she said, he's doing great, actually.
Right.
And, I think in the context of their friendship,
right.
it's fine.
Right.
You understood. Oh,
yeah.
I don't know why. Just you get in that habit.
Yeah.
I actually did that, dude. I won't say who. I'll tell you after the podcast, with a mutual friend. It was awful, whose mother passed.
Oh.
And we had prayed about it, knew about it, didn't do the service or anything. And for some reason, we're at dinner one time, and I asked her, I said, so your mom, and kind of looked, oh, well, remember she passed. I said, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's funny, because that happened to me a lot when my father first passed away as well. You know, where it's so commonplace for people to think about, you have two parents. I mean, and I'll say even more so when I was growing up, there were some divorces. I mean, it's not like it is today.
Sure.
And my father died when I was so much younger. So we're talking mid-90s as opposed to,
you were 14, Nathan,
I was.
Right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And, I had my drama teacher. I was doing a skit with another friend, and so we had an extra drama session we were doing for this skit that we were going to be performing.
Yeah.
And, she just kind of turns to me, and we were trying to figure out costuming and things like that, and we needed some oversized, exaggerated clothing.
Yeah.
And my father, everybody knew him, and he was like a big guy, 6'4".
Yeah.
And so, she just kind of looks at me and she's like, well, you could just ask your dad if he has anything you could use. Oh. And I think this was within 2 weeks of him passing away. Yeah. And as soon as she said it, the horror just came over her face. Yeah. And I was like, it's okay. I mean, I get it. It hasn't sunk in and processed totally for me. So,
yeah.
But you do, it's not something that's readily on your mind when it happens, you know?
Yeah, and you're right. I like you to autopilot.
Yeah.
You're just in autopilot. It's just natural to ask how. Sometimes I even think, it probably wasn't the most sensitive to ask so-and-so how she's doing.
Right.
Knowing.
That she's probably not
been in
doing.
a terrible place. But it's just second nature.
Yeah.
It's like a how's the weather question. It's what we do.
Yeah.
So
now, Andy Stanley's not the only one you've been watching, though. We're going to get to a couple others, but like, have you been looking at like Alistair Begg more too?
No, actually,
Okay.
I haven't, because part of it is I wanted to look at communicators that I haven't normally.
Oh, so just heretics.
That's right. Yeah, I've benefited most then by watching myself. I'm like, man, this guy
Joel
sucks.
Osteen coming up there.
Right. Actually, I have watched a little Joel.
Have
Osteen.
you, Mr.
Yeah.
Smiley? Huh?
Just from a he was one of the ones
Yep.
I was going to mention. The guy, I'm going to say it, and this is very risky.
Sure.
And
sure.
you've got some connections here, dude. Is Furtick in Elevation?
Ferdy.
Couple things that stand out to me about him.
Yeah.
Again, we're really trying to stick to style, etc. I never noticed. I've seen a million clips of him
Sure.
from people positively and negatively putting stuff online.
Sure.
But he, have you ever noticed he holds a microphone?
Yeah.
He doesn't use
Yeah.
the
earpiece.
the
or anything.
earpiece.
Yeah.
He
yeah.
holds. It's kind of like an old school big mic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've asked a couple of people about that. These are some of the theories I've gotten.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe he's put it out there somewhere. So why do you think Furtick doesn't use a headset? And one dude who we both know said, honestly, and he wasn't even saying critically, because I don't think he wants to mess up his outfit. And I said, oh, okay. Matt Smith, who I saw yesterday,
Yep.
I asked him about it, and he said that he thinks it's more that Furtick has kind of studied that Southern, almost Pentecostal, maybe you'd say even Baptist-y culture, T.D. Jakes,
Yep.
all that, and it's almost a position of power when you hold a mic like that. I'm just saying culturally that's more common
Sure.
in those settings where you hold the mic. It means something
Sure.
almost. Because I've wondered, that's interesting. He's about the only guy I've seen that doesn't use a headset today.
Right. Right.
It would drive me nuts personally.
Oh, yeah.
Because I love having both hands free.
Yeah.
I feel like you
Right.
can do more. And the few times I find myself in a visiting church context, I'm holding a mic, I haven't liked it.
Yeah.
Remember in the old days too when we had sound problems?
Right.
I'd have to hold a mic and it drove me nuts.
Yep.
Because immediately I'm doing some mental adjustment. Oh, I don't have both hands
Right.
free. And I got to keep this here.
Yeah.
And you can only do everything with one hand, and
Yeah.
it feels kind of strange. Furtick, though, let me say a couple of things about him that stand out to me. Sheer oratory, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I've watched him the most.
Okay.
Because I've been very intrigued by, naturally, there's a lot going on him all the time. And
Yep.
he is a master of kind of the slow build-up. If you watch, usually at the beginning, it's very conversational. A couple of jokes here and there. And I think he's now created a culture where they're waiting
Right.
for him to hit the stride.
Right.
And I sense, I could be wrong on this, but this is what it feels like as an observer online, that he is almost at times teasing the audience,
Sure.
giving
Sure.
them a couple of scraps of meat that they want more.
Right.
He'll start like he's going down a path, and boom, and then he'll pull it back.
Right.
And it's almost like you almost see people, oh, give me more, give me
Right,
more.
right.
And then at one point in the sermon normally is the big eruption.
Right.
Everybody stands on their feet. They're clapping. He's screaming. And
Right.
Matt Smith does love the one line where he says, "I'm preaching better than you're listening." Matt goes, "Come on, whatever you think of, that's a brilliant line."
Right.
So it's interesting the very different stuff. Now, some of the stuff he does, to me, is I would never want to do this. I think it's
What,
church
you wouldn't want to
culture.
lay down on a couch in George Costanza position, posing for the camera?
My biggest problem is I don't think I'd be able to get back up. Furtick's obviously in much better shape than I am, so for him, he could just do a one-handed push-up. Be back up. For me, man, I would need the elder team to come out, with a crane and get me back up on my feet. But he there's a lot of cultural stuff where he says, turn to your neighbor. You ever see that?
Yeah.
Turn to your neighbor.
Yeah.
Tell your neighbor, and they repeat it to each other and
yeah.
stuff, which was a surprise to me. I'm going to get off the reservation here a little bit because I think of Furtick as and I think wrongly in some ways. I assumed more of a kind of quote-unquote seeker-sensitive guy. So in my mind, I've got a little bit of that in me. I'd rather call it what Larry Osborne does, sinner-friendly.
Right.
Because I think the seeker-sensitive movement, we've talked about that before, Nathan, that much of it can be commended, but I think where it's gone too far is when the gospel gets truncated and reduced to this kind of tepid, you're lonely, Jesus will cure all your loneliness.
Right.
You're purposeless, he'll give you purpose.
Right.
You know, we make him sort of this this kind of
or you were created for his benefit.
Exactly.
The other way around.
Yeah, exactly. There's that sense where the gospel loses its edge.
Right.
The encounter between the holiness of God and the sin of man and the beauty of what Jesus did. That's where I think it's gone off the rails.
Right.
But in my mind, I do think regularly, and we talk about this at our elders meetings, okay, if somebody comes in to our church and the coffee tastes like crap, I don't want that. It creates a bad experience. My ideal is that everything is wonderful, everything is great, and the thing that puzzles them is, man, what is it that's bugging me? And I want it to be the gospel.
Yeah.
Because they can't blame it on a rude usher.
Yeah.
They can't blame it on crappy coffee.
Yeah.
They can't blame it that our bathroom looked filthy and
Yeah.
toilets weren't cleaned and flushed and all this stuff.
Dude, one of the things that I remember most about our church when we were at the old building is a guy named Rudy and his boyfriend.
Oh, yes, right.
Attended for several weeks. And I knew them because they owned a hair cuttery place right across the street from where I worked at the liquor store.
Yeah.
And I remember being intrigued at the fact that that for a time they were coming, and this was a good 3-4 month stretch.
It was, yeah.
That they were there every Sunday. Even so, this was going into the summer, so they came to the church picnic that we had and got involved with, the activities and things like that. And I was intrigued by that because. You know, it's not like you were pulling any punches with the gospel or anything like that. It was very clear, that God's here to deal with our sin.
Yeah.
And so I was fascinated by that, and that's one of my favorite stories to tell. Is that's what a church should look like. That people should be comfortable enough to interact and fellowship with the body of Christ, but also knowing that the thing that you're doing isn't okay.
Right.
Right. And I think, that I believe ultimately is what probably drove them away.
Yeah.
But I find that fascinating that they were comfortable enough to be there for that period of time because of the love that they were experiencing from the body.
Dude, isn't that what you want it to be about? You want it to be completely pleasant, welcoming, good. And you leave that gospel encounter there to do its work. That's the part I always feel like to go with Stott. Man, he's the master chef.
Yeah.
He prepared the dish. You just bring it out and serve it.
Yep.
You don't have to rearrange the parsley.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have to do all the other stuff. The decor of the restaurant, the lighting, all all that stuff. Yeah, knock yourself out. Make it as welcoming as you can. Make sure that meal is as it was prepared.
Yeah.
So all that to say that the thing that surprised me about Furtick is that there's a lot of kind of internal church culture. Like in my mind, the last thing that I want to do is make a visitor who is good chance is going to be an introvert.
Sure.
Do something churchy that's going to make them feel weird.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a surprise. So I assumed he was probably a little more of a seeker-sensitive guy that would not do that. But he does this thing throughout the messages that he gives where he says, now turn to your neighbor and tell him.
Right.
And he makes him repeat something.
Yeah.
And he goes, now turn to your other neighbor.
Right.
And you see the people, they're all saying it to people. And some people, the introvert wants to be sitting, say it's a wife, husband on the right, daughter on the left, so she's safe.
See, I wonder, though, if that's also indicative of his location, Charlotte, South, Bible Belt. So even the unbelievers there are going to be aware and familiar because even the unbelievers in the South are going to be attending church every Sunday because that's what you do.
That's a brilliant observation, dude. I think, because you wonder if you try to do that, say, in Chicago.
Yeah.
Or try to do it in Boston.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're right. There's a southern – because I know, and you know this too, when I've been in the South, my grandmother still does. She's almost 100 in Cary, outside of Raleigh. I remember as a kid walking around her neighborhood. We'd go down in the summer and see her for a week and sometimes go to Myrtle Beach with her. Everybody in that neighborhood says hello.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they don't do that where I am
Right.
in Maryland.
Right.
Although people that come from, regions north say it's a little friendlier. Seems, pardon me, to get friendlier the
Right.
further
The
south
further south you go. Right.
Yeah, so I think there is a Bible Belt culture
Yeah.
where that works in. But he even uses that as part of his sermonic device.
Yeah.
I can just tell, here's a guy who's thought through how he wants to communicate things.
Right.
And it's interesting. Osteen is still, to me, a little intriguing. I get Furtick, the appeal. I get Stanley. I don't quite get Osteen.
I feel like, and it's been years since I've seen Osteen. The last time I saw a message from him, it was I had a friend who was talking about him, and this was years ago, and I really didn't know much about him, and so I started watching him regularly just because it was a big deal, realized he was a heretic, and stopped. But the thing that I felt was so odd was it felt fake.
It does feel fake.
It felt staged.
That's exactly right. The other guys don't feel as staged to me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some panache, particularly with Furtick.
Right.
Panache, whatever the term is, some rhetorical flair.
Right.
But it feels like
they're genuinely...
Yeah, you're getting this guy. Let me tell you what I want to tell you.
Yeah.
Where, Osteen feels like there's like a warehouse somewhere.
Right.
With, here's kind of health, wealth, light sermon scripts.
Right.
And do this. I don't quite get it.
Yeah.
I would say this. He's very nice.
You're right.
His niceness, I think, aids him well. He's got that $1 million white cap teeth smile. There's something about him. I don't know this for a fact that I wonder is very appealing to women. I don't know for sure. I'm sure there's a number of guys there. I haven't really looked at that, but he's not. Hear me on this. I'm not saying anything about it.
Sure.
He's not a masculine guy.
Yeah.
There's a certain way of communicating that's very...
I almost feel like he's the televangelist that was plucked from the 70s and transported to 2018.
That's a good way to look at it. I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
That suit, the suit's still there, and the clean cut, and that smile's always going on. And, there's just, like you said, there's nothing like overly intimidating about him. I mean, Furtick looks like he could pick you up and rip you in half.
Right. Yeah, Furtick's like he's kind of a Heartland guy. He's a muscle guy.
Yeah.
A guy's a ripped guy. So, although he looks like he might be somewhat short.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could take him.
Right.
But I could throw my weight at him.
That's right.
So and I'm trying to think who else, Nathan, because I know this is a shorter one. Our time is evaporating, but the basic thing for me is,
have you been anything on Rob Bell?
No,
nothing going back.
No, I did watch him years ago.
Okay.
Because I've always been kind of intrigued by different guys' styles.
Yeah.
And no, but I haven't watched him recently, so everything would be old. And he's not really speaking anywhere now, right?
Yeah. What about Willow Creek dude who just retired?
Yeah, Heibels I watched for a long time, but I haven't watched him recently. But let me think. There were a few standouts with Heibels when I was in. Heibels, one, just a brilliant storyteller. He could really tell a good story. I've heard, it seems like every time I've heard him, I thought, I get this guy can capture something really. I remember him telling a story about his neighbor and his trash cans. And I remember at the end of it thinking, boy, that's a really boring story, but I was riveted.
Right.
Like there was nothing that happened that exciting, except that when I'm reading Stephen King.
Yeah.
And it's not even a scary section. The way he can paint the milieu of a town in Maine.
Yeah.
Like, if you're drawn to that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I feel like I'm there.
Right.
He's painting it so well.
Nothing particularly furthering the story or anything, but just setting it up. And
yes.
Yeah.
That's what I remember about Heibels. I feel like there's 3 or 4 times where I heard him, and the story he told in a very textured way with just enough detail about the person he's talking to that it made me think this guy is a storyteller. That's served him well as a communicator. Obviously, I'm not commenting on
sure
all the stuff that went down near the end of his ministry and the Me Too stuff. But
sure.
By the way, have you and Zach done any Me Too stuff?
the only thing we've done is, basically stuff that we always do, like, the gospel, like the gospel should interact in our social lives as well. And so we should be concerned when we, with the racism that we see.
Sure.
We should be concerned about women's rights.
Yeah.
But we haven't specifically touched on
like
any.
yeah.
And I think part of that is because, honestly, at the end of the day, we're a couple dudes. So
I was going to say,
listen to us?
Yeah, that's a good. That might be one for a guest.
Yeah, I maybe having Elise Fitzpatrick on and doing it with her.
Yeah,
that would probably be.
That would be cool. Yeah, dude. So we're wrapping up on the communication stuff, which we could always revisit another time.
Sure.
You were asking me about Hybels, and so here's what my takeaway right now.
Yeah.
Is I'm trying to be a little more intentional. If I feel that the most important thing is the content.
Yeah.
We all know that.
Yeah.
The content of what's said, it's scriptural. It's I'll use all the Piper adjective. It's grace saturated, scripturally seasoned.
Yeah.
Superlative it to death. So the content, but then I am thinking, are there some things I'm doing that are maybe blocking this a little bit? Like even simple things. It's always plagued me, like it has a lot of preachers. I spend way too much time on an opening because I'm rushing the last point.
Sure.
That might be the most important point.
Sure.
And I'm like, well, I ran out of time because I blabbed, so much.
Right.
That I'd love to give this point 5 minutes instead of 1.
Right.
And unpack it a little bit more. So things like that.
Yeah.
That I think your style, how you illustrate, how you start.
Well, and so people understand the reason why it's rushing is because the way our services are set up, we have 2 services. And so, in the first, like you could take all the time you want in that second service, but the first service, we're on time limit where it's got to be done because you have people waiting out in the hallway ready to come in.
As we like to, the Holy Spirit has the freedom to move, but he has to do it within only a 5-minute window.
That's right.
We say there is the freedom for him to move and change things within a 5-minute window.
That's right. Otherwise, come to the second service.
Yes, exactly. And then even on that, dude, I try to approximate both.
Yeah.
Because I always feel like because of our community groups,
right,
are sermon based, and it's happened occasionally just from slight nuances,
right,
where someone will say, "Oh, well, I think when Greg shared such and such," what? I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Because I change it a little from service to service.
Sure.
So I try to keep them the same because our ideal is that we wish we could have everybody at one service.
Right.
So you want to approximate it as closely as you can.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Without the time restraint, you are a little more open to things. But I'm finding, Nathan, that I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in this. I think people shut down. I think 40 minutes and beyond, you're pushing.
Yeah.
Maybe you have the most compelling sermon that's ever been given and people are hanging on.
Yeah.
But a buddy of mine, I'm not going to mention him because, Matt Smith used to be a guest on this podcast, recently, and everybody knows it because he told me this and his church knows, preached a message that was 61 minutes.
Oof.
And I thought, yeah, that's probably a little long.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because and Matt would know that too. Because I guarantee you ask people, they remember it more when it's shorter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because they're not jumping in and out. I mean, chances are, if you're preaching something that long, you've made a point and you've said that point 5 or 6 times.
Right.
And so I got it the first 2 or 3 times you said it.
Right. You don't need to keep saying it. That's a great point. Great point. So, yeah, just fun to kick that around a little bit. And I hope your sermon goes well.
Thank you.
On
Thank
July
you.
1st.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be preaching Jesus is Greater Than. And I'm going to be using Hebrews as the main text.
Great.
And just looking at, because Hebrews is the Jesus is Greater Than book. And so just all the things that Jesus is greater than creation, Jesus is greater than man, Jesus is greater than the prophets.
So good.
I'm going to finish on Jesus is greater than death and let that kind of be the finishing mark. So just all the things Jesus is greater than. And,
would that be recorded? Do they record the sermons there?
I'm not sure.
All right.
If it is, I'll see if I could get you a copy.
Absolutely. Or just do what I used to do when we were having some recording problems.
Oh, yeah.
Go up with your iPhone.
Yeah.
Remember,
hit
just
the
hit
record button.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
It really is. There were times that, think in the old archives, there's 1 or 2 sermons that are recorded on my iPhone.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they sound kind of old school and
sure.
stuff. But,
I'll have to try to remember that.
Yeah.
So, Awesome, dude. Well, this has been so much fun. I'm glad we were able to do this. Not too bad, 44 minutes.
Yeah,
so
got a solid one in there.
Yeah. But, Greg, we're going to go ahead and sign off now. Dude, we just rocked the Casbah.
Rocked it.
These go to 11.